The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Ho was sitting in his small office at the Earth Galactic Embassy when his communication device lit up with a golden seal. He recognized it immediately. The Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. He opened the message and read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. The Empire was requesting human assistance. They needed a diplomat to help negotiate a trade route through dangerous space. 3 alien factions had been fighting over this territory for decades, and no one had been able to bring them to peace. Ho leaned back in his chair and looked out the window at the stars. He was 34 years old. He had served 15 years in Earth's military before becoming a diplomat. He had seen war. He had seen death. He had learned that the universe did not care about your feelings or your hopes. It only respected strength and wisdom. But why would they ask for human help? The answer was simple, though most humans did not like to hear it. Earth was still considered a young species in the galaxy. Humanity had only achieved interstellar travel 87 years ago. To the elder races who had been exploring the cosmos for thousands of years, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. Many alien species looked down on humanity. They called humans mayflies because of their short. They mocked human technology as primitive. They whispered that humans were too emotional, too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with important matters. Ho had heard all of these insults before. He had learned to ignore them. Words were just words. Actions were what mattered. He accepted the mission. 3 days later, Ho stood on the bridge of a human transport ship as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the home world. His team was small. His tactical advisor and communications officer stood beside him reviewing data on a tablet. Behind them, Sergeant Wu Jin checked his security team's equipment one final time. "The capital world," said quietly, looking at the planet growing larger in the. "I studied images of it at the academy, but seeing it in person is different." Ho nodded. The planet was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Its surface shimmered with patterns of light and color. Giant crystal structures rose from the ground like frozen waterfalls. They had spent 10,000 years perfecting their world, turning it into a living work of art. "Remember why we are here," Ho said. "We are not tourists. We are not here to be impressed. We are here to do a job." Their ship landed on a platform made of polished white stone. As the doors opened, Ho straightened his uniform and stepped out into the alien air. It smelled sweet, like flowers he had never encountered before. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth, making him feel like he might float away if he was not careful. A group of officials waited to greet them. They were tall and slender, with skin that shifted colors depending on the light. Their eyes were large and golden, and they moved with a grace that made Ho feel clumsy in comparison. They wore flowing robes decorated with symbols that glowed softly. The lead official bowed slightly. "Welcome to Prime, human delegate. The Emperor awaits you." They were led through the palace, and with each step, Ho noticed the looks. Nobles stood in the hallways, watching the humans pass. Some looked curious. Others looked confused. But many looked at Ho and his team with open contempt, as if they could not believe such primitive creatures were walking through their sacred halls. Ho ignored them all. He kept his face calm and his pace steady. The throne room was the most magnificent space Ho had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into clouds of light. Pillars of crystal lined the walls, each one humming with ancient energy. At the far end of the room, on a throne made of woven starlight, sat Emperor. The Emperor was old, even by standards. His skin had faded to a soft silver color, and his movements were slow and careful, but his eyes were sharp. They studied Ho with an intelligence that missed nothing. Beside the throne stood a young female. She was beautiful in the way all were beautiful, with perfect features and flowing hair that seemed to move on its own. But there was something cold in her expression, something proud and dismissive. This was Princess Vila. She was 19 years old by counting, which meant she had lived for nearly 200 Earth years. She was the heir to the Empire. She had never known failure or hardship. She had been told her entire life that she was special, that her species was superior, that the universe existed for her to rule. She looked at Ho the way someone might look at an insect that had crawled into their home. Ho bowed respectfully to the Emperor. "Your Majesty, I am honored by your invitation. Earth is ready to assist the Empire in any way we can." Emperor smiled warmly. "Delegate, I have heard good things about humanity's diplomatic skills. The situation we face is difficult. 3 factions have been fighting over the trade route for 60 years. Many have tried to bring peace. All have failed. I hope that fresh eyes might see solutions that we have missed." "I will do my best, Your Majesty," Ho replied. He could feel Princess Vila's eyes on him. She had not bowed. She had not spoken a word of greeting. She simply watched him with that cold, superior expression. High Commander, the Emperor's military advisor, stepped forward. He was an older with scars on his face, marks of battles fought long ago. Unlike the princess, his expression was thoughtful, even cautious. "The human delegate and his team will be given quarters in the East Wing," announced. "A formal reception will be held this evening to introduce him to the court." Ho nodded his thanks. As he turned to follow the guides to his quarters, he caught one last glimpse of Princess Vila. She was whispering something to a noble beside her. They both laughed quietly. Ho did not react. He simply walked away. Fell into step beside him. "The princess does not seem happy to see us," she said in a low voice. "No," Ho agreed, "she does not." "Does that worry you?" Ho considered the question for a moment. He thought about all the battles he had fought, all the enemies he had faced, all the times people had underestimated him because he was human. "No," he said finally, "it does not worry me at all." That evening everything would change. But for now, Ho simply walked through the crystal halls of the palace, calm and patient, waiting for whatever came next. He had learned long ago that the universe tested everyone eventually. The only question was whether you were ready when the test arrived. Ho was ready. The formal reception began as the twin sons of Prime sat behind the Crystal Mountains, the great hall filled with hundreds of nobles, each one dressed in robes that cost more than most humans earned in a lifetime. Music floated through the air, played by instruments that had no strings or keys, creating sounds through pure thought. Ho stood near a pillar at the edge of the room with Sergeant Wu Jin. He wore his formal diplomatic uniform, simple and black with a small earth emblem on the chest. Compared to the flowing, glowing robes of the around him, he looked plain, almost invisible. But he was not invisible to everyone. Princess Vila moved through the crowd like a predator through water. Nobles bowed as she passed. Conversation stopped. All eyes followed her. She was wearing a gown made of woven light that changed color with each step, and her hair floated around her shoulders as if gravity was just a suggestion she chose to ignore. She walked directly toward Ho. Tensed beside him, "She is coming this way." "I see her," Ho said calmly. The princess stopped in front of him. She did not bow. She did not offer any greeting. She simply looked at him with those cold, golden eyes and smiled. "So," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "this is the human diplomat my father has brought to save us." The nearby nobles stopped talking. More drifted closer, sensing entertainment. Within moments, Ho found himself at the center of a circle of watching aliens. "Your Highness," he said, bowing politely, "it is an honor to meet you." Vila laughed. It was not a kind sound. "An honor? Yes, I suppose it would be for someone like you. Tell me, human, how old are you?" 34 years, Your Highness." 34 years. She repeated the number as if it were a joke. "I have gowns older than you. I have memories of events that happened before your grandparents were born. Your entire species learned to leave your little planet less than a century ago. We were mapping the far edges of the universe when your ancestors were still living in caves and hitting each other with rocks." Laughter rippled through the watching crowd. Ho said nothing. His face remained calm, almost peaceful. Vila seemed annoyed by his lack of reaction. She stepped closer. "Your kind calls itself intelligent, but you live for such a short time. What can you possibly learn in 70 or 80 years? By the time you begin to understand anything important, you are already dying. You are like mayflies, appearing for a single day and then vanishing. Why would my father trust anything important to creatures who will be dead before the consequences of their decisions even begin to show?" More laughter. Some nobles were openly pointing at Ho now, whispering to each other. His hands had curled into fists at her sides. Wu Jin's jaw was tight, but Ho had ordered them before the reception to stay calm no matter what happened. They followed that order, even though it clearly hurt them to do so. Vila was not finished. "I have studied your history, human. Your species has spent most of its existence killing each other over patches of dirt. You fight wars over ideas. You destroy your own planet because you cannot control your greed. You make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. You are children playing with toys you do not understand." She paused, looking at him with pure contempt. "My father believes you can help us negotiate peace between 3 warring factions. I believe he has made a mistake. What wisdom could a mayfly possibly offer to those of us who measure our lives in centuries? You will fail, human. And when you do, perhaps my father will finally understand that your species belongs in the background of galactic history, not at the center of it." The hall had gone completely silent. Everyone in the room was watching. Emperor stood near his throne, his expression unreadable. High Commander watched from the shadows, his face thoughtful. Everyone waited for Ho to respond. He took a slow breath. He looked at Princess Vila with calm, steady eyes. He saw her youth beneath her arrogance. He saw her pride that had never been tested. He saw a girl who had been told she was perfect so many times that she had started to believe it. And then he did something no one expected. He bowed, a small, respectful bow. Not deep, not dramatic, just a simple acknowledgement. And then he turned and walked toward the exit. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He did not raise his voice or show any anger. He simply turned his back on the princess of the empire and walked away. "Come," he said quietly to his team, "we are leaving." And Wu Jin followed him without hesitation. The silence in the hall was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Princess Vila stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, completely unprepared for this response. She had expected him to fight back. She had expected him to argue, to make excuses, to try to prove himself worthy. That was what everyone did when she challenged them. They defended themselves. They begged for her approval. They tried to change her mind. But this human had done none of those things. He had simply left. And somehow, that was worse than any argument could have been. "Stop," a voice commanded. Emperor had stepped forward from his throne. His voice was not loud, but it carried through the silent hall like thunder. Ho stopped walking. He turned to face the emperor but did not approach. "Delegate," the emperor said, "I must apologize for my daughter's behavior. Her words do not represent the views of the empire. Please do not leave." Ho stood still for a long moment. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "I was not sent here to prove humanity's worth. Earth does not beg for respect. Your empire invited us because you need something we can provide. If the princess believes we are beneath this task, then perhaps the empire should handle these negotiations alone. I will not waste my time trying to convince those who have already decided not to listen." The words hung in the air like smoke. Princess Vila's face had changed. The arrogance was still there, but something else had appeared beneath it. Confusion. and perhaps, for the first time in her long life, a small seed of doubt. High Commander stepped forward and spoke quietly. "The human is right, Your Majesty. We invited them. We need them. If we send them away in disgrace, word will spread. Other species will hesitate to work with us. And we still have 3 factions ready to go to war over the root." Emperor nodded slowly. He looked at his daughter with an expression that was hard to read, then turned back to Ho. "Please stay, delegate. I give you my personal word that you will be treated with the respect you deserve. My daughter will not interfere with your work." Ho considered this for a long moment, then he nodded once. "Very well, Your Majesty, I will stay, but I have a condition." "Name it." "The princess will observe the negotiations. She will watch everything I do, and she will not speak a single word unless I ask her a direct question." The request was unusual. Some nobles gasped quietly. Princess Vila's eyes widened with shock and anger. But Emperor smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached his eyes. "Agreed," he said. "My daughter has much to learn. Perhaps this will be educational for her." Ho bowed again, properly this time. Then he turned and walked out of the hall to prepare for the work ahead. Behind him, Princess Vila stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by whispers. For the first time in her life, she had been dismissed, and she had no idea how to feel about it. The human had not yelled, he had not argued, he had not tried to hurt her with words. He had simply treated her as if she was not worth the effort. And that silence, she would soon learn, was louder than any scream. The night after the reception, Emperor summoned Ho to his private study. The room was smaller than Ho expected. Instead of grand crystal walls and floating lights, the Emperor's study was filled with old books, strange artifacts, and comfortable furniture. A fire burned in a fireplace made of blue stone, casting warm shadows across the walls. The Emperor sat in a simple chair, looking tired but thoughtful. He gestured for Ho to sit across from him. "Tea," the Emperor offered, pointing to a pot on a small table between them. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Ho took the cup and waited. He knew that powerful people rarely summoned you just to offer refreshments. There was always something more. Emperor sipped his own tea slowly before speaking. "You surprised everyone tonight, delegate, including me. Most people who face my daughter's tongue try to defend themselves. They argue. They make speeches about their accomplishments. They try to change her mind. You did none of those things." "No, Your Majesty, I did not." "Why?" Ho considered the question carefully. Outside the window, the stars of Prime's night sky burned bright and cold. "Because it would not have worked," he said finally. "Your daughter had already decided what she believed about humans. No argument I could make would change her mind. Words only have power when the listener is willing to hear them. She was not willing, so I did not waste my words." The Emperor nodded slowly. "And what if everyone thinks the same way she does? What if no one in the galaxy respects humanity? Then we will earn that respect through our actions, or we will fail. Either way, we will do it on our own terms, not by begging others to see our value." Ho paused. "Respect cannot be demanded, Your Majesty. It can only be earned, and sometimes it can only be earned by those who do not need it." Emperor set down his tea and studied Ho with ancient, golden eyes. "You are an interesting man, delegate, very different from the humans I have met before." "There are many kinds of humans, Your Majesty, just as there are many kinds of—" "Yes." The Emperor glanced toward the door, as if seeing his daughter through the walls. "There are, though some have not yet discovered which kind they wish to be." He stood and walked to a window, looking out at the city below. "I chose you for this mission for a reason, delegate. Do you know what that reason was?" "I assumed it was because of my experience with difficult negotiations." "That was part of it, but not the main reason." The Emperor turned to face him. 20 years ago, there was a battle at a human colony called Helios 4. Do you remember it?" Ho's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. I remember. You were there. A young lieutenant, barely 20 years old. The collective sent an invasion fleet of 200 ships to take the colony. Earth had 12 ships to defend it. Everyone expected the humans to surrender or die. We did not surrender. No, you did not. The Emperor's voice was quiet but intense. Your fleet commander was killed in the first hour, so was the second in command, and the third. The chain of command collapsed. Your ships were scattered and burning, and then a young lieutenant named Ho took charge of what remained. Ho said nothing. You organized the surviving ships into small attack groups. You used the colony's asteroid field as cover. You fought for 9 days using tactics they had never seen before. You turned their own ships against each other. You made them so afraid of traps that they stopped advancing. The Emperor paused. By the end, they had lost 47 ships. Humanity had lost 3. The commander surrendered and retreated. That battle was a long time ago, Your Majesty. Yes, but I have not forgotten it, nor has anyone else who studies military history. The Emperor returned to his chair. They were confused. They had superior numbers, superior technology, superior experience. They should have won easily, but they lost to a group of young humans who refused to accept defeat. Do you know what the commander said after the battle? No, Your Majesty. He said, we were not fighting soldiers, we were fighting something else, something that did not know it was supposed to lose. The Emperor smiled slightly. That is why I chose you, delegate, not because you are the most experienced diplomat, not because you have the most impressive credentials. I chose you because you are human, and humans do not know when they are supposed to lose. Ho absorbed this in silence. Then he asked, and your daughter, why did you order her to observe the negotiations? The Emperor's smile faded. Because she needs to learn lessons that I cannot teach her. She has lived her entire life surrounded by people who tell her she is perfect. She has never met anyone who treated her as an equal, let alone someone who treated her as unimportant. She needs to understand that the universe does not care about her title or her bloodline. It only cares about what she does. And you believe watching me work will teach her this. I believe you are the first person in 200 years who has not been impressed by her. That alone is valuable. The Emperor leaned forward. Teach her, delegate, not with words. She will not listen to words. Teach her the way you taught teach her by showing her something she has never seen before. Ho thought about this request for a long moment. It was unusual. He had been asked to negotiate a peace treaty between 3 warring factions. Now the Emperor was also asking him to educate a spoiled princess. But there was something in the Emperor's eyes that reminded Ho of his own father, something tired and hopeful at the same time. The look of a parent who knows their child has problems but loves them anyway and hopes they will grow. I will do what I can, Your Majesty, Ho said finally, but I cannot promise results. Change must come from within. If the princess does not wish to learn, no teacher in the universe can force her. I understand. I ask only that you try. Ho stood and bowed. Then I will try. Now, if Your Majesty permits, I would like to see the intelligence files on the 3 factions. I need to understand who I am dealing with before the negotiations begin. The Emperor pressed a button on his chair, and the wall behind him lit up with thousands of documents, reports, and images. 60 years of conflict, condensed into data. Everything we have is now available to you, the Emperor said. High Commander will assist you with any questions. The negotiation chamber has been prepared on a neutral station at the edge of the disputed territory. Representatives from all 3 factions will arrive in 5 days. Ho looked at the wall of information. It was overwhelming. Decades of grudges, betrayals, battles, and broken treaties. Hundreds of diplomats had tried and failed to bring peace. But Ho did not feel overwhelmed. He felt something else instead. A quiet excitement. the same feeling he had felt at Helios 4 when everything seemed impossible and the only option was to find a way anyway. "I will begin immediately," he said. As he left the Emperor's study, he passed High Commander waiting in the hallway. "Delegate," said, falling into step beside him, "I heard the Emperor's request, teaching the princess while negotiating peace between three factions that have been killing each other for 60 years. That is quite a task." "Yes, Commander, it is." "Do you think you can do it?" Ho thought about the question as they walked through the crystal halls. Outside the windows, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, three species were preparing to continue a war that had already claimed millions of lives. "I do not know if I can do it," Ho admitted, "but I know that I will try, and that is always enough to begin." Nodded slowly, something like respect flickering across his face. "Then let us begin," he said. And they did. For 3 days, Ho did not leave his quarters. He read every report. He studied every battle. He memorized the names of commanders, the histories of grudges, the economic needs of each faction. He slept only 4 hours a night, and when he dreamed of maps and numbers and the faces of aliens he had never met. Brought him food that he often forgot to eat. Wu Jin stood guard outside his door, turning away visitors who wanted to speak with the human diplomat. And Princess Vila, following her father's orders, watched from the doorway in confused silence. She did not understand what he was doing. Diplomats prepared for negotiations by practicing speeches and displaying their authority. They wore their finest robes and made sure everyone knew how important they were. But this human sat alone in a simple room, reading documents like a scholar studying for an examination. On the 4th day, Ho finally emerged. His eyes were tired, but his mind was sharp. "I am ready," he told High Commander. "Take me to the negotiation station." The neutral station floated in the empty space between 3 hostile territories. It was an old structure, built centuries ago for exactly this purpose. Neutral ground where enemies could meet without fear of attack. When Ho arrived, he found 3 delegations waiting in separate rooms, refusing to even look at each other. The air was thick with hatred and suspicion. The first faction was the Syndicate. They were warriors, tall and covered in natural armor that had evolved on a dangerous planet. Their leader, a general named, sat surrounded by armed guards. They valued strength above all else. They believed weakness deserved to be conquered. The second faction was the Collective. They were traders and merchants, their bodies adapted for swimming through the liquid methane oceans of their home world. Their leader, a smooth-voiced negotiator named, smiled constantly but meant nothing by it. The valued profit. Everything else was just a means to an end. The third faction was the Dominion. They were ancient, almost as old as but had been pushed to the edges of the galaxy by younger, more aggressive species. Their leader, an elderly female named, spoke rarely but with great precision. They valued respect and recognition. They were tired of being forgotten. Previous negotiators had tried to bring all 3 factions together in the same room. This had always failed. Within minutes, old insults would surface, accusations would fly, and the talks would collapse into screaming matches. Ho did something different. He met with each faction separately. First, he went to General of the alien warrior looked down at Ho with open contempt. "A human," growled. "They sent a human to negotiate with us. This is an insult." Ho did not flinch. "General, I am not here to impress you. I am here to solve a problem. The trade route has been contested for 60 years. In that time, they have lost 47 warships and nearly 12,000 soldiers. You have gained nothing. How much longer do you wish to bleed for a trade route you cannot use?" The directness surprised. Most diplomats spoke in circles, using fancy words and avoiding the truth. This human spoke like a soldier. "We fight because the route belongs to us," said. "We claimed it first." "Did you?" Ho pulled out a data tablet. According to records I have studied, they established a mining station in the sector 3 years before they arrived, and they have ancient temples on 2 of the root's planets that are over 10,000 years old. Your claim is not as strong as you believe. His eyes narrowed. You are well-informed human. I am, and I know something else. Ho leaned forward slightly. You do not actually want the trade route. What you want is security. Your home world is vulnerable. Enemies have attacked it twice in the past century. You want the route because controlling it would give you early warning of any invasion fleet. The general was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You understand us better than the fools who came before. I understand that every conflict has surface reasons and true reasons. The surface reasons are what people say. The true reasons are what people actually need. Ho stood. I will think about how to give you what you truly need, General. We will speak again. Princess Vila watched this meeting from behind a one-way window. She had expected the human to bow and beg, to try to please the angry warrior. Instead, he had spoken to General as an equal. He had challenged these claims with facts. He had looked into the heart of their position and named their true desire. She did not understand how he had done it. Next, Ho met with the merchant leader smiled her empty smile and tried to flatter him. Delegate, how wonderful to meet you. I have heard such impressive things about humanity. Your species has risen so quickly in the galaxy, truly remarkable. Ho ignored the flattery. Representative, your people have been fighting for the route for 60 years. In that time, you have spent more money on weapons than you would have earned from the trade route in 3 centuries. Your people are suffering. Your economy is weakening. How much longer can you afford this war? The smile flickered, just for a moment. We fight because and would control our trade if we surrendered. Would they? They do not care about trade. They want security. They do not care about trade either. They want recognition. Ho leaned back in his chair. What you truly want is access. You want the right to move your ships through the route without paying tribute to anyone. You want freedom to trade. Smile had faded completely now. She looked at Ho with new eyes. You are not like other diplomats. No, I am not. I will think about how to give you what you truly want. We will speak again. Finally, Ho met with The ancient alien sat perfectly still, her large eyes watching him with patient wisdom. She did not speak. She waited. Ho respected this. He waited too. After several minutes of silence, finally spoke. You are quiet, human. The others who came before you talked endlessly. They filled the air with empty words. You do not. Words are tools, elder. They should be used when needed and saved when not. A wise approach. She tilted her head slightly. You have met with you have heard their claims. Now you come to us, the forgotten ones. What do you expect to find? I expect to find a people who are tired of being overlooked. Your species is ancient and wise, but the younger races treat you as if you do not matter. They fight over territory that holds your sacred temples without even acknowledging your claim. His eyes widened slightly. No previous negotiator had ever mentioned the temples. The route holds places sacred to your people, Ho continued. Sites of religious and historical importance. You do not truly want to control the trade route. You want the other factions to acknowledge your claim. You want respect. For the first time, the ancient smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. You see clearly, young human, very clearly indeed. Princess Vila stood behind the one-way window, her thoughts in turmoil. She had watched all 3 meetings. She had seen Ho find the hidden truth beneath each faction's demands. He had not used tricks or threats or displays of power. He had simply listened, studied, and understood. She had called humans primitive and emotional. She had said they were too short-lived to learn anything of value. But in 3 days, this human had understood 3 alien species better than diplomats who had studied them for decades. She did not know what to feel: confusion, doubt, and perhaps, for the first time in her long life, something that felt like curiosity. What else had she been wrong about? Back in his quarters that night, Ho began drawing up a plan. A framework where they would get security, they would get access, and they would get recognition. 3 different needs, satisfied by one creative solution. Looked at his notes and shook her head in amazement. Do you really think this will work? Ho did not look up from his writing. I do not know, but I know it is possible, and that is enough to try. In the corner of the room, invisible behind a privacy screen, Princess Vila stood watching. And for the first time, she did not look at the human with contempt. She looked at him with questions. The negotiations were entering their 3rd day when Princess Vila finally broke her silence. She found High Commander alone in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The old warrior turned as she approached, his face unreadable. Princess, you have been quiet these past days, unusual for you. I have been thinking. She stood beside him, looking out at the cold vastness of space. The human confuses me. Delegate, how so? Vila struggled to find the right words. She was not used to admitting confusion. She was not used to feeling unsure about anything. But watching Ho work had shaken something inside her that she did not fully understand. He is not what I expected, she said finally. I called him primitive. I called his species mayflies, barely worth noticing. But I have watched him talk to 3 factions who have been killing each other for 60 years, and in 3 days he has made more progress than our diplomats made in decades. He does not threaten them. He does not try to impress them. He just listens and thinks and finds solutions that seem obvious once he says them. How does he do it? Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that sounded almost like regret. Princess, there are things about humanity that your tutors did not teach you. Things that our people prefer to forget because they make us uncomfortable. What things? The old commander turned to face her fully. What do you know about the Battle of Helios 4? Nothing, should I? Yes, you should. Activated a holographic display and images appeared in the air between them. Ships burning, explosions blooming in the darkness of space. The chaos of war. 20 years ago, the collective invaded a human colony world called Helios 4. They sent 200 warships. The humans had 12. Everyone expected them to surrender or die. And they won. Vila blinked. That is impossible. 12 ships cannot defeat 200. According to our calculations, yes, it should have been impossible. The humans disagreed. Changed the display, showing tactical movements that looked like chaos at first but slowly revealed a pattern. Their fleet commander was killed in the first hour. So was the second in command. And the third. Their chain of command collapsed completely. A young lieutenant named Ho took charge of what remained. Vila's eyes widened. The delegate. Yes, he was 20 years old. He had never commanded a fleet before. He had no training for this situation, no experience, no reason to believe he could win. But he gathered the surviving ships and started fighting anyway. He used the asteroid field for cover. He set traps. He launched attacks that made no sense until suddenly they made perfect sense and ships were exploding. He fought for 9 days without stopping. The display showed the final moments of the battle. Ships retreating in disorder. A small group of damaged human vessels limping toward their colony, victorious. The lost 47 ships. The humans lost 3. Their commander surrendered and fled back to his home world. Paused. He was executed by his own people for the shame of losing to such a small force. Vila stared at the images. How did they do it? That is the question, Princess. That is the question that keeps military commanders across the galaxy awake at night. Deactivated the display and looked at her with ancient, serious eyes. Humans are short-lived. This is true. But do you understand what that means? They do not have centuries to wait for things to change. They cannot be patient. They must force change to happen, quickly and violently if necessary. Every human knows that their time is limited. Every human lives with the knowledge that death is always close. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. This makes them dangerous, Princess. More dangerous than you can imagine. A species that knows it will die soon does not fear death the same way we do. They take risks that we would never consider. They fight battles that we would calculate as unwinnable. They refuse to accept defeat because they do not have time for defeat. Vila thought about this. She thought about her own life stretched across centuries. She thought about how carefully planned everything, how they considered every option, how they weighed every risk. Humans did not have that luxury. There is more, continued. I have studied human history extensively. Do you know how long it took them to go from primitive combustion engines to faster-than-light travel? No. 300 years. 300 years, Princess. Our species took 12,000 years to make the same journey. The humans learned so fast that by the time we noticed they existed, they were already knocking on our door. He shook his head slowly. They adapt faster than any species we have ever encountered. When they face a problem, they do not wait for the perfect solution. They try everything until something works. And when they find something that works, they improve it immediately and move on to the next problem. Vila remembered watching Ho study the intelligence files. 3 days. He had learned more about and in 3 days than she had learned in her entire life. Their violent history, she said quietly. I used that to mock him. I said they had spent most of their existence killing each other. Yes, and that is true, but do you understand what that violence produced? His voice was heavy now. It produced soldiers and strategists who have been tested in ways our people never have. We have not fought a major war in 2,000 years. Our military is ceremonial, comfortable, untested. The humans have been fighting constantly since they first learned to pick up rocks. Every generation of humans has warriors who have seen real battle, who have learned what works and what does not, who have passed that knowledge to the next generation. He paused, letting his words sink in. At the reception, you mocked Delegate, you called him a mayfly, you laughed at his short life. The expression was grave. You mocked a man who has commanded fleets in battle, who has watched friends die, who has made decisions that killed thousands of enemies and saved millions of his own people. You laughed at someone who has survived things that would break most. And he did not even bother to correct me, Vila whispered, remembering. No, he did not, and that should terrify you more than any display of anger would. Turned back to the window, looking out at the stars. When a human argues with you, they still consider you worth the effort. When a human fights you, they still see you as a threat worth addressing. But when a human simply turns and walks away without a word, that means they have looked at you and decided you are not worth their time, not worth their energy, not worth a single moment of their precious short life. Vila stood in silence, processing everything she had heard. Her entire understanding of the universe was shifting, cracking like ice under pressure. She had been raised to believe that they were the greatest species in the galaxy, that their long lives and ancient wisdom made them superior to all others, that younger species like humans were primitive children who would eventually mature or fade away. But now she saw something different. She saw a species that burned brighter because they burned shorter, a species that accomplished more in decades than the accomplished in centuries, a species that did not fear death because they had never had time to become comfortable with life. The delegate, she said slowly, he is succeeding where our diplomats failed. Is this why? Partly, nodded. Diplomats spend years building relationships and gathering information. They move slowly and carefully. Delegate does not have years. He has days. So he works faster, thinks faster, acts faster. He cuts through the surface problems to find the real issues beneath. He does not waste time on ceremony or politics. He simply solves problems. I called his species emotional. I said they made decisions based on feelings rather than logic. They do use emotion, but that is not a weakness, smiled grimly. Emotions drive them forward. When a human loves something, they will die to protect it. When a human hates something, they will never stop fighting it. When a human decides to accomplish a goal, they pursue it with an intensity that we cannot match because we do not feel things as strongly as they do. Vila thought about the look in Ho's eyes when he had turned away from her at the reception. Calm, patient, unmoved. She had thought it was coldness. Now she realized it was control. Underneath that calm surface was a fire burning hot enough to forge stars. He had simply chosen not to let it out. "What should I do?" she asked quietly. Looked at her with something that might have been approval. Watch, learn, and perhaps when the time is right, try to understand instead of judge. The delegate may have lessons to teach you that no ever could. Vila nodded slowly. Then she turned and walked back toward the negotiation chambers. For the first time in 200 years, Princess Vila of the Empire was ready to learn something new. The negotiations were almost complete. After 5 days of separate meetings and careful planning, Ho had done what many believed was impossible. He had created a framework that satisfied all 3 factions. They would receive an early warning network along the trade route, giving them the security they needed. They would gain free trade access with no tribute required. The temples would be declared protected historical sites, recognized by all parties. It was elegant, it was fair, and most importantly, it could work. The final signing ceremony was scheduled for the next morning. Representatives from all 3 factions had gathered in the station's main conference hall. Emperor had traveled from Prime to witness the historic moment. Princess Vila stood beside her father, watching Ho with eyes that no longer held contempt. But in the shadows of space, danger was approaching. Commander of the military had opposed the peace talks from the beginning. He believed that war was the only path to glory for his dying species. He believed that peace would make the weak and forgotten. And he had decided that if he could not stop the negotiations through legitimate means, he would stop them by force. His ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel 500 kilometers from the station. 40 more ships followed. The first warning came as a scream of static across all communication channels. Then the lights flickered. Then the alarms began. Ho was standing near the window when he saw the first explosion. A cruiser had fired on the station's defense platforms. They were gone before anyone could react. "We are under attack," a station officer shouted. "Military vessels, over 40 of them. They have disabled our shields and weapons. We are defenseless." Panic erupted in the conference hall. Diplomats from all 3 factions scrambled for exits. Guards drew weapons. Emperor reached for his daughter, pulling her close. Ho did not panic. He felt the fear, acknowledged it, and set it aside. There would be time for fear later. Right now, there was only survival. "Wu Jin," he called out. His voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Secure the Emperor and the Princess. Move them to the interior. Stay away from exterior walls." Sergeant Wu Jin did not hesitate. He grabbed 2 of his soldiers and pushed through the crowd toward the royal family. Within seconds, they had formed a protective circle around Emperor and Princess Vila. Ho turned to his communications officer. "Can you reach our ship?" Was already working on her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. "Jamming signals are blocking most frequencies, but I think I can punch through on an encrypted channel. It will take time." "Do it. Call for backup. Earth ships, anyone who can help." Ho looked around the room, assessing the situation. The main doors were sealed. The windows showed more ships arriving every minute. Boarding parties would be here soon. "We need to fortify this position," he said. "Everyone who can fight to me. Everyone else to the center of the room and stay down." The guards hesitated. They were not used to taking orders from a human, but something in Ho's voice demanded obedience. One by one, they moved to follow his commands. General of the stepped forward. "I have warriors with me. We will fight." Representative of the shook her head. "Fight? With what? We are trapped. We should negotiate." "There is no negotiating with Commander," said Elder of the quietly. She looked old and tired. "He is a fanatic. He wants this peace to fail. He wants to restart the war. He will kill everyone in this room to make that happen." Ho looked at her. "Then we do not let him." The first breach came through the east corridor. Soldiers poured through the broken door, their weapons raised. Ho moved before anyone else could react. He had picked up a weapon from a fallen guard. It was an energy pistol, unfamiliar in his hands but similar enough to human designs that he could operate it. He fired twice. 2 soldiers fell. "Cover the entrance," he shouted. "Do not let them through." What followed was chaos. The battle stretched across hours. Ho lost track of time. He was everywhere at once, moving from position to position, directing fire, plugging gaps in their defense. When soldiers fell, he took their places. When ammunition ran low, he found more. When people lost hope, he gave them his calm. Princess Vila watched from behind a barricade, her heart pounding. She had never seen violence like this. She had never smelled blood or heard the screams of the dying. She had read about battles in books, seen them depicted in art, heard old soldiers tell stories, but she had never understood what it truly meant. And in the center of it all was Ho. He did not fight like the heroes in stories. There was no glory in his movements, no dramatic speeches or impressive displays. He moved with cold efficiency, like a machine designed for a single purpose. Every action was calculated. Every shot was aimed to kill. He did not waste a single movement. This was not the calm diplomat who had ignored her insults. This was not the patient scholar who had studied intelligence reports for 3 days. This was something else entirely, something born from fire and death and the desperate will to survive. This was a human at war. At one point, Ho was hit by a glancing shot that tore open his arm. He barely paused. He tore a strip from his uniform, wrapped the wound tightly, and kept fighting. "Delegate," Wujin called out, "you need medical attention." Later, Ho replied without looking, "After." 4 hours into the battle finally broke through the jamming signals. "I have contact. Earth fleet responding. They are 2 hours away. Ships are closer 90 minutes. "Tell them to hurry," Ho said. He looked at the remaining defenders. They were tired, injured, running low on everything, but they were still fighting. 90 minutes, he called out to everyone. "We hold for 90 minutes, that is all. We can do this." He said it with such certainty that people believed him. Even the warriors who had mocked humans all their lives. Even Princess Vila, who had called his species mayflies. The final assault came 30 minutes before rescue arrived. Commander himself led the attack. He was a massive warrior, old but still powerful, driven by hate and the certainty of his own cause. He cut through defenders like a storm through leaves. Ho met him in the center of the room. They fought without words. Ho was faster but was stronger. The human used every trick he had learned in 20 years of battle. He dodged. He feinted. He looked for weaknesses. And when he found one, he struck. His blade slid between the armored plates of his chest. The commander froze, disbelief in his ancient eyes. "You are just a human," whispered. "How?" Ho pulled his blade free. "I am what I need to be." Commander fell, and with him fell the last hope of those who wanted the war to continue. When the fleet arrived 23 minutes later, they found the station damaged but intact. The surviving diplomats were shaken but alive. The peace treaty was signed that same day, before anyone could change their mind. Ho stood at a window, his arm properly bandaged now, watching the ships dock with the station. His team surrounded him. They had all survived. Somehow, against all odds, they had all survived. Princess Vila approached him slowly. Her robes were stained with ash and blood. Her perfect hair was tangled and dirty. She looked nothing like the arrogant princess who had mocked him at the reception. She looked at the human who had saved her life, the mayfly who had fought for 6 hours with a wounded arm, the primitive species that had held the line when ancient could not. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. So she simply stood beside him in silence, looking out at the stars. And for the first time, the silence between them was not cold. It was understanding. The peace treaty was signed in a ceremony that no one would ever forget. General of the pressed his armored thumb against the document first. His species valued strength, and they had seen strength in the human who had stood against impossible odds. Representative of the sign next, her usual fake smile replaced by something more genuine. She recognized good business when she saw it, and peace was the best business of all. Elder of the sign last, her ancient eyes filled with tears that her species rarely showed. The war that had burned for 60 years was over. Millions of lives would be saved. Trade would flow freely. Old enemies would learn to become neighbors. And it had been a human who made it possible. Emperor hosted a celebration on Prime that night. The Crystal Palace glowed brighter than ever before. Music filled the air. Nobles who had laughed at humans just weeks ago now spoke of them with respect. But Ho did not attend the celebration. He stood alone on a balcony overlooking the gardens, his bandaged arm resting against the railing. The twin moons of Prime hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the flowers below. It was beautiful, but he barely noticed. He was thinking about the soldiers who had died defending the station, about the blood on his hands that no amount of washing would ever truly clean, about the cost of peace that rarely appeared in the history books. He heard footsteps behind him and did not turn. "You are missing the celebration," Princess Vila said quietly. "My father wants to honor you." "I know, I will pay my respects later." Ho did not look at her. "For now I need quiet." Vila hesitated. The old her would have been offended by his casual dismissal of a royal celebration. The old her would have demanded he show proper respect. But she was not the old her anymore. She walked to the railing and stood beside him, close enough to speak quietly but not so close as to intrude on his space. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. "I have been thinking," Vila finally said, "about what happened at the reception, about what I said to you." Ho waited. "I was cruel, I was arrogant. I mocked you and your entire species because I believed we were superior. I believed that our long lives and ancient history made us better than everyone else." She paused, struggling with words that did not come easily. "I was wrong." Ho turned to look at her. His expression was calm, patient, unreadable. "I understand now," Vila continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why you said nothing when I insulted you, why you simply turned and walked away." "Do you?" "Yes," she met his eyes. "You did not need to prove anything with words. You knew that your actions would speak louder than any argument. You knew that defending yourself would only give my insults power. By staying silent, you took that power away." Ho considered this for a moment. Then slowly he shook his head. "That is part of it, but not all of it." Vila frowned. "Then why did you stay silent?" "Because I have learned that respect cannot be demanded or argued into existence. It can only be earned or lost." He turned to face her fully. "When you mocked me, you had already decided what you believed about humans. Nothing I said would have changed your mind. Words only have power when the listener is willing to hear them. You were not willing. But you could have tried. You could have defended your species." "I could have, but why? What would it have accomplished?" Ho's voice was gentle but firm. "I had nothing to prove to you, Princess. My worth is not determined by your opinion. My species' value is not measured by whether you approve of us. I stayed silent because you were not worth the effort of an explanation, and because I knew that eventually you would have to learn for yourself what you refused to hear from me." The words should have hurt. They should have stung like the insults she had thrown at him weeks ago, but somehow they did not hurt at all. They felt like truth. "I did learn," Vila said quietly. "High Commander told me about Helios 4, about your history, about what humans truly are beneath the surface. Did he tell you everything? He told me enough. She looked out at the gardens, her voice thoughtful. He told me that humans burn brighter because they burn shorter, that you accomplish more in decades than we accomplish in centuries, that your short lives make you fierce in ways we cannot understand. Ho nodded slowly. Some of that is true, but it is not the whole truth either. Then what is the whole truth? He was quiet for a long moment, considering how to answer. The moons had risen higher now, their light turning the gardens into a landscape of silver and shadow. The whole truth is that every species has strengths and weaknesses. Humans are short-lived, yes. This makes us impatient and sometimes reckless, but it also makes us appreciate every moment. We do not waste time because we have so little of it. We take risks because we know that waiting too long means dying before we accomplish anything. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Live for thousands of years. This gives you wisdom and patience that we will never have, but it also makes you cautious, comfortable. You have learned to wait for problems to solve themselves, to plan in centuries instead of years. Sometimes this is wise. Sometimes it means you miss opportunities that faster species seize. Vila listened intently, absorbing every word. Neither way is better or worse. They are simply different. Ho looked at her. The universe is vast enough for many kinds of wisdom. The mistake is thinking that your way is the only way. That is what you did at the reception, and that is why I walked away. To teach me a lesson. No, he smiled slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him. I walked away because I had work to do and did not wish to waste time on someone who was not ready to learn. The lesson you learned was your own discovery. I had nothing to do with it. Vila absorbed this in silence. Then she did something that surprised them both. She bowed. It was a proper bow, deep and respectful. The kind of bow that royalty only gave to equals or superiors. She had never bowed to anyone who was not of royal blood in her entire 200 years of life. Thank you, delegate, she said, for saving my life, for saving my father, for teaching me things I desperately needed to learn, and for being patient with a foolish princess who did not deserve your patience. Ho watched her bow. Then he returned it, matching her depth exactly. Not deeper, as a subject would bow to royalty. Not shallower, as a superior might to an inferior. A bow between equals. You are not foolish, princess. You were young and untested. Now you have been tested. What you do next will determine who you truly are. Vila straightened. For a moment, they stood facing each other in the moonlight. Two people from different worlds who had found understanding in the strangest of circumstances. Will you return to Earth now? She asked. Yes, my work here is done. Will you come back? Ho considered the question. Perhaps if I am needed. You will always be welcome on Prime. She smiled, and it was a real smile without arrogance or coldness. I will make sure of it. He nodded his thanks. Then he turned and walked toward the balcony doors. Delegate, Vila called out. He stopped but did not turn. That day at the reception when you walked away without a word, I thought you were being rude. I thought you were weak because you did not fight back. And now I understand that it was the opposite. The silence was your strength. You were so certain of your own worth that you did not need anyone else to confirm it. Ho turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see his profile against the moonlight. Remember that, princess. The most powerful thing you can do is sometimes nothing at all. Words are easy. Silence is hard. But silence gives others the space to find their own truth. He walked away, leaving her alone on the balcony. The next morning, the human delegation departed for Earth. Emperor asked if there was any reward they desired for their service. Credits, technology, trade agreements, anything within the Empire's power to give. Ho smiled slightly and shook his head. Remember what we did here, that is enough. The emperor nodded solemnly. He would remember, and he would make sure that the entire galaxy remembered as well. As the human ship rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars, Princess Vila stood at a window and watched it go. She was not the same person who had mocked the human delegate just weeks ago. She was not sure who she was becoming, but she knew it was someone better. Someone who had learned that true strength did not need to announce itself. In the years that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. The humans who had negotiated an impossible peace. The diplomat who had turned his back on a princess and walked away. The battle against impossible odds that a handful of humans had won through sheer determination. Other species heard the whispers and learned to be careful. The humans were patient. They were precise. They accomplished more in their short lives than most species accomplished in. And when a human turned and walked away in silence, when they decided you were not worth their time or energy or words, that was when you should be most afraid. Because it meant they had already moved on. And humans who moved on did not look back.